My name is Dakota Vance, and my story begins in the bustling heart of New York City, America. I grew up in a tall brownstone on the Upper West Side, surrounded by the endless hum of taxis, the glow of neon lights, and the steady rise and fall of ambition in the city that never sleeps. My father, Marcus Vance, was not only my parent, but also a towering figure in American business. He founded Vance Innovations long before I was born, a company people across the country knew as a symbol of creativity and success in the burgeoning world of sustainable energy solutions. My mother, Eleanor, was softer, more reserved, a talented landscape architect who brought tranquility to our urban existence. She passed away when I was only 12, leaving a void that my father, in his driven, often emotionally distant way, tried to fill with a singular focus on my potential. So most of my upbringing fell to him, or rather to the rigorous, almost military-like schedule he imposed. Private tutors, advanced summer programs, competitive internships, all geared towards one outcome: my seamless integration into Vance Innovations. I grew up with the taste of ambition in my blood, recognizing early that my path was already charted. Dinner conversations, whenever he was home, were filled with talk of green technologies, market fluctuations, and multi-million-dollar deals. But for all his talk of my future, my father never promised me anything explicitly. I understood early that in his world, nothing came for free, not even for his only daughter. Merit, he constantly preached, was the only currency that mattered. After I graduated from MIT, 4 years of long winters, grueling exams, and endless coffee, I packed my bags and returned to New York. Most people assumed I would walk straight into a corner office at Vance Innovations, but I started as just another employee in the business development department, specifically tasked with identifying and nurturing strategic partnerships for our new wind turbine technology. I knew some colleagues whispered about nepotism, but I was determined to prove myself through sheer grit and undeniable results. For 8 grueling years, I climbed the ranks. I worked harder than anyone, often the first to arrive and the last to leave. I spearheaded projects that secured major government contracts for our offshore wind farms, navigated complex international negotiations to acquire rare earth minerals, and personally closed deals that added hundreds of millions to the company's bottom line. My proposals were meticulous, my presentations flawless, and my understanding of the sustainable energy market, particularly the nuances of wind and solar technology, was second to none. I foresaw shifts in policy, predicted supply chain disruptions, and identified emerging competitors with an almost uncanny accuracy. My father, ever the stoic, would offer a rare, tight-lipped, "Good work, Dakota," or a curt nod, which, in his world, was the highest praise. I craved more, of course. I craved his pride, his acknowledgement that I was not just his daughter, but a force in my own right. But that was a battle I fought silently, with every successful project, every new innovation. My biggest triumph came with Project Zephyr. For years, Vance Innovations had struggled to crack the residential solar market. Our previous attempts were clunky, expensive, and lacked user-friendly integration. I saw the potential for a decentralized energy model where homeowners could not only generate but also store and even sell excess power back to the grid. It was a bold, risky vision that challenged the company's traditional large-scale utility focus. I spent 2 years developing a comprehensive strategy, assembling a cross-functional team, and designing a proprietary energy management system. I secured crucial venture capital funding, convinced skeptical engineers to rethink their approach, and personally scouted and negotiated partnerships with cutting-edge battery manufacturers. Project Zephyr was poised to revolutionize the industry, a true game-changer that would expand Vance Innovations' reach into a lucrative new sector. The pilot program, launched 6 months prior, had exceeded all expectations. Customer satisfaction was through the roof. Energy savings were unprecedented, and the data projected a market share increase that would make us untouchable. The annual company gala was always the most anticipated event on the Vance Innovations calendar. It was a lavish affair held in the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel, a dazzling display of wealth, power, and influence. This year, it was particularly significant. Rumors had been swirling for weeks about a major executive restructuring, and many believed my long-awaited promotion to Chief Strategy Officer was finally imminent. I had dedicated my entire adult life to this company, to my father's vision, and to proving my worth. Tonight was supposed to be the culmination of all that effort, the public recognition I had quietly yearned for. I wore a custom-made emerald green gown, a color I rarely chose but which, tonight, felt like a vibrant declaration of my readiness. My closest friends and a few trusted colleagues, who had seen my tireless work firsthand, offered their quiet congratulations, their eyes reflecting the excitement I tried to suppress. My father, Marcus, looked particularly distinguished in his tailored tuxedo, his silver hair gleaming under the chandeliers. He caught my eye across the crowded room and gave me a rare, almost imperceptible smile, a gesture that sent a ripple of hopeful anticipation through me. This is it, I thought. This is my moment. The dinner concluded, and the chimes of a crystal glass signaled my father's ascent to the podium. The chatter in the ballroom died down, replaced by a respectful hush. Marcus cleared his throat. His voice, usually booming, was subdued, almost reverent. He spoke of the company's remarkable year, its record-breaking profits, and its bold trajectory into the future. He spoke of innovation, resilience, and the unwavering dedication of its employees. My heart pounded in my chest. Then, he paused, his gaze sweeping across the room, lingering for a fraction of a second on me. And now, he announced, his voice suddenly resonating with a dramatic flourish, it is my distinct honor to announce a pivotal promotion, a strategic move that will shape the very destiny of Vance Innovations. A collective intake of breath filled the room. My hand instinctively went to my chest, a small, triumphant smile playing on my lips. I am delighted, Marcus continued, his eyes now fixed on a spot just beyond my shoulder, to promote a truly exceptional individual, a visionary who has consistently demonstrated unparalleled leadership and a deep understanding of our core values. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in congratulating Julian Thorne, our new Chief Strategy Officer. My smile froze. The blood drained from my face, leaving me feeling cold and numb. Julian Thorne, my colleague, my peer, a man who had joined Vance Innovations just 2 years ago, straight out of an MBA program with little practical experience in the energy sector. A man whose primary contribution to Project Zephyr had been to strategize the color palette of the marketing brochures. He stood up, beaming, his perfectly coiffed hair catching the light, acknowledging the polite applause that rippled through the room. He looked directly at me, a flicker of something that resembled pity, or perhaps smug satisfaction, in his eyes. He raised a hand in a small, almost imperceptible wave, a gesture of casual triumph. My world, which had moments ago felt so brilliantly clear, fractured into 1,000 shimmering shards. As for Dakota, my father continued, his voice now devoid of any warmth, a crisp, businesslike tone that cut through the lingering shock. She has been instrumental in Project Zephyr's early success, and we appreciate her contributions. However, we've decided her talents would be better utilized elsewhere. Effective immediately, Dakota will transition into a consulting role, advising on specialized small-scale projects. This will allow her to explore new avenues without the burden of executive responsibilities. A consulting role, a euphemism for being sidelined, for being kicked out of the inner circle, for being told, in front of hundreds of the industry's most influential figures, that I wasn't good enough, that my years of dedication, my groundbreaking work, amounted to nothing more than a temporary, dispensable contribution. The polite applause for Julian faded into an uncomfortable silence. Every eye in the room felt like a spotlight, burning into my humiliation. I felt a surge of nausea, a dizzying wave of betrayal that threatened to send me to my knees. But I was Marcus Vance's daughter, and Marcus Vance's daughter did not break in public. I squared my shoulders, plastering a neutral, almost detached expression on my face. My father avoided my gaze, turning instead to Julian. a proud, almost paternal smile now gracing his lips. I stood there for a few more agonizing seconds, then, with a quiet dignity I didn't know I possessed, I turned and walked out of the ballroom. I didn't run. I didn't make a scene. I simply exited, leaving the glittering spectacle and the hushed whispers behind me, the emerald green of my gown feeling like a cruel mockery of my shattered aspirations. The next few days were a blur of cold fury and raw pain. My father refused to take my calls. Julian, now ensconced in the corner office I had envisioned for myself, sent an embarrassingly patronizing email offering his support during my transition. The whispers in the industry were brutal. Dakota Vance, the golden girl, finally proved she couldn't cut it. Nepotism only goes so far. Her father always knew she was too reckless. The narrative was meticulously crafted, designed to discredit me, to erase my contributions, to justify my sudden public downfall. But they had underestimated me. They had mistaken my quiet perseverance for weakness, my professional focus for a lack of ambition. What they didn't understand was that I had learned from the best, my father, Marcus Vance, a man who built an empire from nothing. He had taught me ruthlessness, strategic thinking, and the invaluable lesson that sometimes, the most devastating setbacks, are merely opportunities in disguise. The pain of his betrayal, sharp and unexpected, acted not as a deterrent but as a potent accelerant, igniting a fire within me that burned brighter than any ambition I had felt before. This wouldn't be the end of my story. It would be the prologue to my true beginning. I immediately rejected the consulting role. My father sent a formal letter warning me of breach of contract and the legal ramifications. I laughed. He had just handed me the very freedom I needed. I liquidated my few investments, emptied my savings, and took out a second mortgage on my small Brooklyn apartment. Every penny, every last shred of capital went into my new venture, Solstice Energy. My vision for Solstice Energy was audacious, even by New York standards. I wasn't just going to build a better residential solar company. I was going to build a distributed energy network. I saw a future where every home wasn't just a consumer, but a micro power plant, connected, intelligent, resilient. I envisioned a network where excess energy from one home could power another, where entire communities could become energy independent, resilient against blackouts and market fluctuations. It was a leap beyond what even Project Zephyr had conceived, a true paradigm shift in sustainable energy. I started small, working out of a cramped co-working space in Dumbo, fueled by lukewarm coffee and an almost maniacal drive. My initial team consisted of 2 brilliant but equally disillusioned engineers I had secretly poached from Vance Innovations, and a tenacious marketing guru I'd met at an industry conference. We worked 18-hour days, 7 days a week, designing, coding, prototyping. We developed a proprietary AI-powered energy management platform that learned a household's consumption patterns, predicted weather-related generation fluctuations, and optimized energy flow with breathtaking precision. We secured partnerships with innovative manufacturers for sleek, high-efficiency solar panels and next-generation solid-state batteries. The initial months were a brutal grind. Funding was tight. Skepticism from established players was rampant. My father's considerable influence made securing early contracts incredibly difficult. Doors that once opened for Vance now slammed shut for Solstice. He ensured the industry heard only one narrative, that I was an amateur, a failure, a rebellious daughter who had squandered her potential. But every rejection, every condescending remark, every closed door, only hardened my resolve. I had a vision, and I had the data to prove its viability. And unlike my father, I wasn't interested in legacy. I was interested in revolution. My breakthrough came with the small town of Everwood, in upstate New York, a struggling rural community, plagued by aging infrastructure and frequent power outages. They were desperate for a reliable, affordable energy solution. I presented my distributed energy network concept not as a product, but as a partnership. I promised them energy independence, lower costs, and a future free from reliance on the aging centralized grid. It was a massive undertaking, a proof of concept for my entire vision. I poured every resource, every ounce of my team's energy into Everwood. We installed smart solar systems on every home, integrated community battery storage, and developed a local energy trading platform. The risk was immense. If Everwood failed, Solstice Energy would fail, and my career would be irrevocably over. But Everwood didn't fail. It thrived. Within 6 months, Everwood became a beacon of energy independence. Their power bills plummeted. They weathered severe winter storms without a single outage, while neighboring towns suffered in the dark. The national news picked up the story, then international outlets. The Everwood miracle, they called it. My platform, my technology, my vision had transformed an entire community. The data was undeniable. Decreased carbon footprint, vastly improved energy resilience, substantial economic savings for every household. The calls started flooding in from other small towns, from larger municipalities, from major development firms, from the Department of Energy. Solstice Energy became synonymous with innovation, with reliability, with a future of sustainable power. We secured contracts across the country, building distributed energy networks from California to Maine. Our valuations soared, from a scrappy startup to a burgeoning powerhouse. Within 5 years, Solstice Energy was not just a competitor. It was a market leader, a disruptive force, a company worth billions. My father, Marcus Vance, watched from the sidelines. I saw him at industry events, his face a complex mask of disbelief, grudging admiration, and thinly veiled regret. Vance Innovations, still a large and profitable company, had stagnated. Julian Thorne, the visionary he had so publicly championed, had made no significant strides in the residential solar market. My father's traditional focus on large-scale projects, once his strength, had become his Achilles heel in a rapidly evolving industry. He had missed the shift, the decentralized future, the very revolution I had warned him about, the one I had left to build myself. The ultimate irony, the cruel twist of fate that truly cemented my triumph, came on a cold Tuesday morning, precisely 7 years after that fateful gala. My assistant, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Chloe, buzzed my intercom. "Miss Vance, a Mr. Marcus Vance is here to see you. He says it's urgent." My heart gave a curious thump. Not anger, not even triumph, but a strange hollow ache. 7 years. 7 years of building, fighting, and proving. 7 years since he had publicly dismantled my dreams. "Send him in," I said, my voice calm, steady, betraying none of the swirling emotions within me. Marcus Vance walked into my expansive, glass-walled office at the top of the Solstice Energy Tower in Manhattan. He looked older, his shoulders slightly stooped, his impeccably tailored suit a little less crisp than I remembered. His eyes, once so sharp and unyielding, now held a weary vulnerability, a plea I had never seen before. He looked around the office, at the bustling energy of my team, at the panoramic views of the city, at the sleek, minimalist design that reflected Solstice's innovative spirit. He saw my name, Dakota Vance, CEO, emblazoned on the office door. He saw the company he had dismissed, the vision he had rejected, now towering over the industry he had once dominated. "Dakota," he began, his voice raspy, a shadow of its former power. I need your help." I leaned back in my ergonomic chair, my gaze unwavering. "Help with what, father?" He hesitated, then plunged in, desperation etched on his face. "Vance Innovations. We're facing a hostile takeover. A consortium of old guard energy firms. They're circling. Julian. He's proven inadequate. We need a strategy. We need your expertise. We need a leader. Someone who understands this new landscape. Someone who can save us." He looked at me, truly looked at me. Perhaps for the first time in my adult life. "I know I made a mistake, Dakota. A terrible mistake. I was blind, arrogant, I'm asking for a second chance. For a partnership. A partnership. The word hung in the air, heavy with unspoken history, with years of pain and quiet fury. The temptation for vengeance, for a triumphant "I told you so," was immense, a dark, sweet whisper in my ear. But I had moved beyond that. My revenge was not his humiliation, but my own unparalleled success. It was not in tearing him down, but in building something so magnificent that his past actions became irrelevant. "Father," I said, my voice soft but firm, "Vance Innovations is a company rooted in the past. Solstice Energy is the future. They are fundamentally different entities, with fundamentally different philosophies. We can't merge. We can't partner in the way you're suggesting." His face fell, the last vestiges of hope draining from his eyes. "So, this is it? You'll just watch us fall?" I paused, gathering my thoughts, choosing my words with the same precision I applied to my algorithms. "Number, I won't watch you fall. Not entirely. I will buy Vance Innovations." His head snapped up. A spark of something, perhaps shock, perhaps renewed hope, in his eyes. "Buy us?" "Yes," I confirmed. "Solstice Energy will acquire Vance Innovations. We will integrate your best assets, your manufacturing facilities, your research labs, your long-standing utility relationships, into our network. Your employees will be offered positions within Solstice, provided they align with our culture of innovation and collaboration. The Vance name, as a primary entity, will be retired." I looked at him, my gaze softening. "And for you, Father, I will offer you a position. A consulting role, advising on specialized, large-scale projects, without the burden of executive responsibilities." His mouth opened, then closed. He understood the irony, the poetic justice. He had offered me the very same dismissal, the very same diminishment, 7 years ago. But unlike his offer, mine came from a position of strength, not spite. It was an olive branch, not a weapon. It was an acknowledgement of his past contributions, a chance for him to find a new purpose within the very empire he had unknowingly helped me build. Marcus Vance, the titan who had never apologized, never admitted fault, slowly, almost imperceptibly, nodded. "Thank you, Dakota," he rasped, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you." The weeks that followed the acquisition were a whirlwind. Integrating Vance Innovations into Solstice Energy was no small feat. Their corporate culture, steeped in a century of tradition and top-down management, clashed sharply with Solstice's agile, collaborative, and innovation-driven ethos. There were murmurs of discontent from longtime Vance executives, accustomed to their old ways and resistant to the new, streamlined processes I implemented. Julian Thorne, bless his ambitious heart, tried to rally a small faction of these disgruntled veterans, suggesting they form a breakaway consultancy. I let him. In fact, I subtly encouraged it, knowing that shedding resistance early would only strengthen Solstice's foundations. He eventually left with a handful of like-minded individuals, only to fade into obscurity within a year, a footnote in the industry's history. My father, surprisingly, adapted. He spent his days in a much smaller, yet elegantly appointed, office on a different floor of the Solstice Tower, poring over old market analyses and offering strategic insights on legacy projects. He was less involved in the day-to-day, but his vast network of contacts and his historical understanding of the energy sector proved genuinely valuable in navigating complex regulatory hurdles and identifying niche markets that Solstice had yet to penetrate. We developed a quiet, almost respectful working relationship. He no longer called me Dakota, my daughter, but Dakota, our CEO. It was a subtle shift, but to me, it spoke volumes. The paternalistic shadow that had loomed over my career for so long had finally receded. The growth of Solstice Energy continued at an exponential pace. We expanded into smart grid solutions, not just within communities, but across entire states. Our AI platform, now refined through petabytes of real-world data from thousands of homes and businesses, could predict energy demand with unprecedented accuracy, optimize power distribution, and even anticipate potential grid failures before they occurred. We launched an initiative to build microgrids in disaster-prone regions, providing resilient power infrastructure that could withstand hurricanes, wildfires, and cyber attacks. We didn't just sell solar panels. We sold energy independence, security, and a cleaner future. One of our most ambitious projects was the Nexus City initiative in Nevada. We partnered with a futuristic urban development firm to design and implement a fully sustainable city powered entirely by Solstice Energy's distributed network. Every building, every vehicle, every public space was integrated into our intelligent grid, creating a living laboratory for the future of urban energy. It was a project that garnered international attention, drawing accolades from environmentalists, technologists, and urban planners alike. I personally oversaw its development, spending months on site, walking through dusty construction zones, holding meetings under the vast Nevada sky, and pushing the boundaries of what was thought possible. The sight of Nexus City, glowing self-sufficiently in the desert night, powered by the sun and the wind, was more gratifying than any corporate award. It was a tangible manifestation of my vision. My personal life, once a barren landscape dominated by ambition, began to blossom. My relationship with Chloe, my assistant, evolved into a deep friendship. She was a confidant, a sounding board, and a fiercely loyal ally. We shared late-night takeout, early morning brainstorming sessions, and the occasional, much-needed, sarcastic commentary on the absurdities of the corporate world. I even started dating again, cautiously at first, but then with a newfound openness. I met Dr. Elias Thorne, no relation to Julian, thankfully, a brilliant astrophysicist who found my work on distributed energy as fascinating as I found his research on dark matter. Our conversations were invigorating, spanning everything from quantum mechanics to the logistics of deploying solar arrays on the moon. He understood my drive, my passion, and the quiet fire that still burned within me, the one forged in the crucible of betrayal. He didn't try to dim it. He sought to understand and amplify it. 7 years after the acquisition, Solstice Energy was valued at over $50 billion. We were no longer just a market leader. We were an industry titan, a global force for sustainable change. Our IPO was one of the largest in history, making me, at 35, one of the youngest self-made female billionaires in America. Forbes and Bloomberg ran features on me, calling me the green energy queen and the disruptor who rewrote the rules. I appeared on national television, speaking about climate change, energy resilience, and the power of decentralized innovation. I established the Eleanor Vance Foundation, named after my mother, dedicated to funding sustainable technology startups led by women and minorities. It was a way to honor her gentle spirit, to give back, and to ensure that the next generation of innovators had the opportunities I had fought so hard to create for myself. One crisp autumn afternoon, almost 10 years after that fateful gala at the plaza, I found myself walking through the gardens of our new corporate campus in Silicon Valley. The campus itself was a testament to Solstice's philosophy: net zero energy, rainwater harvesting, solar-powered charging stations for every electric vehicle. Trees rustled overhead, their leaves a riot of red and gold, and the air was filled with a quiet hum of innovation. My father, Marcus, now retired from his consulting role and living a comfortable, quiet life in a penthouse apartment downtown, called me unexpectedly. "Dakota," he said, his voice softer than I had ever heard it, tinged with a melancholy I recognized as genuine. "I was just watching your interview on CNN. You were remarkable." A warmth spread through me, a feeling I hadn't realized I still yearned for. "Thank you, Father." "I was thinking," he continued, a slight tremor in his voice, about that night, at the plaza, about what I did. He paused, and for a long moment, there was only the distant murmur of city traffic and the rustle of leaves. "I was a fool, Dakota. A blind, arrogant fool. I saw a company, not a legacy. I saw a position, not a person. I thought I was protecting what I had built, but I was destroying the very thing that mattered most. His voice broke, barely a whisper. I'm sorry, truly sorry, for everything. The apology I had never expected, never even allowed myself to hope for, hung in the air between us. It wasn't just words. It was the weight of a lifetime of unspoken regret, finally released. A single tear traced a path down my cheek, not of sadness, but of a profound, cleansing relief. The last shard of that shattered night finally dissolved. I know, Father, I said, my own voice thick with emotion. I know. We talked for a long time that day, perhaps the most honest conversation we had ever had. He spoke of his own regrets, his missed opportunities, the loneliness of a life solely dedicated to ambition. I spoke of the lessons I had learned, the strength I had found, and the profound sense of purpose that had emerged from the ashes of betrayal. There was no bitterness, no anger, just a shared understanding, a quiet reconciliation that transcended the past. A few months later, my father called me again. Dakota, he said, a familiar spark of his old entrepreneurial spirit in his voice. I have an idea, a new venture. Small scale, focused on rural community energy resilience. Completely independent, of course. But I was hoping perhaps you'd be open to advising me? Unofficially, of course. A mentor, perhaps? I smiled. The wheel had turned full circle. He, the once unyielding patriarch, was now seeking guidance from me, his once disregarded daughter. I'd be honored, Father, I told him. Absolutely honored. Life continued its relentless, beautiful march forward. My relationship with Elias deepened, leading to a quiet wedding at a small vineyard upstate, attended by close friends, family, including my father, who beamed with uncharacteristic pride, and colleagues who had become family. We adopted 2 children, a spirited girl named Willow, and a curious boy named Leo, and our brownstone on the Upper West Side, once filled with the echoes of my father's ambition, now overflowed with the joyful chaos of childhood. Solstice Energy continued to innovate, pushing the boundaries of what was possible in sustainable technology. We launched new initiatives in global energy equity, working with developing nations to bring clean, affordable power to underserved communities. I traveled the world, not just as a CEO, but as an advocate, a visionary, a woman who had faced down betrayal and emerged stronger, more compassionate, and more determined than ever. The journey of Solstice Energy was not without its bumps and twists, even after the acquisition of Vance Innovations. The integration, while largely successful, brought its own set of challenges. We discovered hidden pockets of outdated infrastructure, bureaucratic inertia, and a subtle resistance to change ingrained in some of Vance's long-serving employees. It required a delicate balance of firm leadership and empathetic communication. I personally held town hall meetings, not just in New York, but at former Vance facilities across the country, listening to concerns, explaining our vision, and building trust one conversation at a time. It was exhausting, but essential. My ability to connect with people, to articulate a compelling future, and to lead with both strength and compassion became as crucial as my technical acumen. One particularly thorny issue emerged from an old Vance Innovations contract with a rural utility provider in the Midwest. It was a legacy deal, heavily skewed in the utility's favor, and it was costing Solstice millions annually while providing outdated, inefficient energy to thousands of homes. My legal team advised a straightforward termination, citing breach of contract clauses. But I knew that would mean abandoning a struggling community to even higher energy costs and unreliable service. It went against everything Solstice Energy stood for. Instead of fighting them in court, I flew to the small, windswept town of Harmony Creek, deep in the heartland. I met with the utility board, a group of weathered farmers and community leaders, suspicious and wary of a big city CEO. I didn't come with threats. I came with a proposal. I laid out a plan to completely overhaul their aging grid, replace their coal-fired power plant with a Solstice-designed solar and wind farm, and implement our distributed energy network, all while guaranteeing lower rates for their residents. The initial reaction was skepticism, even hostility. They had been burned by big corporations before. I spent weeks in Harmony Creek, immersing myself in their community. I attended town hall meetings, drank stale coffee in the local diner, listened to their stories of blackouts and rising bills. I walked through their fields, saw the struggling small businesses, and understood that for them, energy wasn't just a commodity. It was the lifeblood of their existence. I revised my proposal countless times, incorporating their feedback, addressing their concerns, finding ways to make the transition as smooth and beneficial as possible. I brought in my engineers, my community engagement specialists, and even my father Marcus, whose experience in large-scale utility negotiations proved surprisingly helpful. He charmed the old-timers with his deep knowledge of their history, lending an unexpected layer of credibility to our modern vision. It was a slow, arduous process, but eventually, trust began to build. One evening, after a particularly heated town meeting, the oldest member of the utility board, a gruff woman named Agnes, approached me. "Miss Vance," she said, her eyes, sharp and intelligent, boring into mine. "You're different. You actually listen." That was my turning point. The deal was eventually signed, not with a flourish of triumph, but with a handshake and a quiet promise of a better future. The Harmony Creek project became another landmark success for Solstice Energy. It was more than just a financial win. It was a testament to our commitment to people, to communities, and to building a truly equitable energy future. It taught me that sometimes, the most challenging negotiations aren't about raw power, but about empathy, patience, and the willingness to truly understand the needs of others. As Solstice Energy continued its global expansion, I found myself increasingly drawn to the broader implications of our work. Climate change was no longer an abstract concept. It was a daily reality for millions. Energy poverty still plagued vast swaths of the world, leaving communities in darkness, hindering education, and stifling economic development. I realized that my mission extended beyond corporate profits. It was about leveraging Solstice's technology and influence to make a tangible difference on a global scale. I launched the Global Solstice Initiative, a philanthropic arm of the company dedicated to bringing clean, affordable energy to remote and underserved regions. We partnered with NGOs, local governments, and community leaders in developing countries, designing bespoke microgrid solutions that were resilient, sustainable, and tailored to local needs. We built solar-powered schools in rural Africa, established wind farms that powered entire villages in Southeast Asia, and deployed battery storage systems that brought reliable electricity to remote island nations vulnerable to rising sea levels. These projects were challenging, often fraught with political complexities, logistical nightmares, and cultural nuances, but they were also incredibly rewarding. I traveled to these distant lands, not in a private jet, but in jeeps and canoes, meeting the people whose lives were being transformed by the power we brought. I saw children studying under the glow of a solar lamp for the first time, doctors performing life-saving surgeries with reliable electricity, and women building small businesses thanks to consistent power. These experiences grounded me, reminding me that the true measure of success wasn't the number on a balance sheet, but the tangible impact we had on human lives. My work also drew the attention of international bodies and world leaders. I was invited to speak at the United Nations, at the World Economic Forum, and at global climate summits. I found my voice on a larger stage, advocating for policies that supported renewable energy, for equitable access to technology, and for a collaborative global effort to combat climate change. It was a far cry from the quiet, almost invisible employee I had once been, diligently crunching numbers in my father's company. Elias, my husband, was my unwavering anchor through it all. He continued his own groundbreaking research, but he was also my most ardent supporter, my intellectual sparring partner, and the quiet force that kept me grounded amidst the whirlwind of my increasingly public life. He celebrated my triumphs, comforted me during setbacks, and reminded me to breathe, to pause, to cherish the simple moments with our children. Willow, with her fiery spirit and an insatiable curiosity, and Leo, thoughtful and observant, were a constant source of joy and perspective. They didn't care about my net worth or my global influence. They cared about bedtime stories, weekend adventures, and the warmth of a family hug. They taught me that while ambition could build empires, love built a home. My father, Marcus, now in his late 70s, seemed to find a renewed purpose in his quiet retirement. He often visited the Eleanor Vance Foundation, observing the young entrepreneurs we supported, offering them insights from his own long career. He never interfered, but his presence was a comforting, validating force. He saw the positive ripple effect of the foundation, the impact of the investments in new, diverse talent, and perhaps finally understood the true meaning of legacy, not just what you build, but what you inspire. He even started spending more time with Willow and Leo, sharing stories of old New York, teaching them to play chess, and for the first time, embodying the gentle grandfather I had always yearned for. One evening, as I stood on the balcony of our brownstone overlooking the twinkling city lights, Elias came up behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist. "You've built an incredible life, Dakota," he murmured, his chin resting on my shoulder. I leaned back into his embrace, gazing at the glittering expanse of Manhattan. It wasn't always easy, I admitted, a ghost of that old pain flickering through me. I remember thinking, after that night at the plaza, that my world had ended, that I had lost everything. "But you didn't," Elias said, squeezing me gently. "You gained something far greater. You found your own power. You built something that truly matters, on your own terms. And you showed your father, and everyone else, who you really are." I smiled, a genuine deep-seated smile that reached my eyes. He was right. The empire I had built wasn't just made of solar panels and AI platforms. It was built on resilience, on integrity, on the unwavering belief in my own worth. It was a monument to the fact that betrayal, while painful, can be the most potent catalyst for self-discovery and unparalleled growth. My father's attempt to diminish me had, ironically, magnified me. His short-sightedness had forced me to develop a vision so expansive, so revolutionary, that it transcended his wildest dreams. The sun was just beginning to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, casting long, dramatic shadows across the city. The noise of New York, once a constant, unnoticed backdrop, now felt like a vibrant symphony of possibility. I had come full circle, but I was not the same. I was Dakota Vance, CEO, philanthropist, wife, mother, and a woman who had dared to redefine success not by the standards of others, but by the unwavering compass of her own truth. The journey had been arduous, marked by pain and profound betrayal, but it had also forged me into the woman I was today: stronger, wiser, more empathetic, and utterly resolute. The scars remained, faint but visible, reminders of a battle fought and won. But they were no longer a source of shame. They were badges of honor, testaments to my resilience, symbols of the profound transformation I had undergone. This is a story about finding your own path when the one laid out for you crumbles. It's about turning the sting of betrayal into the fuel for your most ambitious dreams. It's about building a future so undeniable, so impactful, that it silences every past slight and illuminates your true worth. Your worth is self-defined, self-affirmed, and eternally yours. You are the architect of your own success, the author of your own story, and the ultimate arbiter of your own value. Don't let anyone else write your narrative. Seize the pen, embrace the struggle, and craft a future so brilliant, so impactful, that it silences every doubt and overshadows every past slight. The most powerful revenge is not in bringing others down, but in rising so high that your light becomes a beacon for those who once stood in your shadow. And in that light, you will find not just success, but true, profound, and undeniable fulfillment.